The rosemary chicken was perfect, the apple crumble cooling on the rack. I thought it was just another Sunday dinner, until my husband dropped a bombshell that shattered my world, and then had the audacity to ask for dessert. The scent of roasted rosemary chicken used to mean Sunday. It meant the low hum of the football game on TV, the clinking of my husband Mark's beer bottle against the coffee table, and the inevitable, perfectly timed arrival of his mother, Carol. For 10 years, this was our ritual. My ritual, really. I was the architect of these perfect Sundays. I planned the menu on Tuesday, shopped for the ingredients on Wednesday, prepped on Saturday, and spent all of Sunday orchestrating a 3-course meal from scratch. It was a full-time job with mandatory overtime, but the pay was a shared roof and the title of homemaker, a title Mark and Carol insisted was a badge of honor. This Sunday started no differently. The chicken was golden brown, the potatoes were crisp, and a rich gravy simmered on the stove. I'd even baked an apple crumble, Carol's favorite, its cinnamon sugar scent mingling with the savory aroma of the roast. Mark was in his usual spot on the sofa, and Carol was perched on the armchair opposite him, holding court. She'd already rearranged my throw pillows and, helpfully, pointed out a tiny smudge on the living room window. I just smiled, the placid, practiced smile of a woman who has chosen her battles very, very carefully. "Dinner's ready," I called out, pulling on my oven mitts. I brought the platters to the dining table, each dish placed just so. The table was set with our good china, the one we only used for special occasions, which somehow included every single Sunday that Carol graced us with her presence. Mark and his mother sat down, and I followed, my body aching slightly from being on my feet all day. Mark beamed. "Honey, this looks incredible," as always. He speared a piece of chicken, and Carol followed suit, inspecting it closely before taking a delicate bite. "It's a little dry, dear," she commented, not unkindly, but with the casual authority of a food critic delivering a foregone conclusion. "You should try brining it next time. I have a wonderful recipe." "I'll keep that in mind, Carol," I said, my smile not faltering. 10 years. I could handle a little poultry criticism. We ate for a few minutes in relative silence, punctuated by Mark's commentary on the game he was missing. Then he cleared his throat. It was a loud, deliberate sound that cut through the quiet chewing. He placed his knife and fork down, perfectly parallel on his plate. "So," he began, looking first at his mother, then at me. "Mom and I were having a chat before you came in, and we've been talking about finances, about the future." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I handled all the finances. I paid the bills from our joint account, managed the budget, and made sure we were saving. I knew our financial situation down to the penny. What was there to talk about? "We think it's time for a change," Mark continued, a strange, almost evangelical gleam in his eye. "A more modern approach. We're going to be true partners, 50-50. I stared at him, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. 50-50? Mark, what are you talking about? We've always shared everything." He shook his head, a condescending little smile playing on his lips. "No, you've managed my money, and that's fine. You've done a great job. But it's not fair to you. It puts all the pressure on you." He was actually trying to frame this as a favor. "From now on, we're splitting everything. My paycheck will go into my own account and you'll have yours. We'll split the mortgage, the utilities, the car payments, all of it, right down the middle. It's the only way to be truly equal." The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick a hammer blow against my crumbling reality. My own account? What was supposed to go into my own account? The $5 I occasionally made from selling a knitted scarf on Etsy? I hadn't had a real job in a decade because he and Carol had insisted it was better for me to be home, to support his career, to build this perfect domestic life for him, for them. I looked at Carol, expecting... I don't know what I was expecting. A flicker of protest? A moment of clarity? But she was just nodding along, a serene, satisfied smile on her face. This was her idea. I could feel it. This was her masterpiece. "And groceries too, of course," Mark added, as if it were an afterthought. 50% of the grocery bill will be your share. My share. 50% of the cost of the very food sitting on this table. The food I planned, bought, and cooked. The food they were currently eating. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. I felt lightheaded, the pattern on the china swimming before my eyes. 10 years of my life, of my labor, of my sacrifice, had just been declared worthless. I was no longer a partner. I was a roommate with culinary duties. Mark seemed to take my stunned silence as agreement. He clapped his hands together with a sickening finality. Great, so that's settled. It feels good to finally have this all out in the open, doesn't it? He picked up his fork, ready to resume his meal as if he'd just discussed the weather. But his mother, Carol, wasn't eating. She was looking around the table, a slight frown creasing her brow. Her eyes scanned the empty space next to the gravy boat. Then she looked directly at me. Her expression held no malice, no understanding, just a simple, unadulterated sense of entitlement. She gave me that placid smile, the one I had perfected, and tilted her head. "Sweetheart, where's the food?" she asked, gesturing to the table. "You forgot to bring out the apple crumble." The ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to grow louder, each second stretching into an eternity. Carol's question hung in the air, thick and cloying like the scent of the cinnamon crumble she was demanding. "Sweetheart, where's the food?" The words echoed in the cavern of my shock. She had just sat there, nodding serenely as her son dismantled my entire existence, and now she wanted dessert. It was so profoundly, breathtakingly absurd that for a moment I thought I might be dreaming. I slowly lifted my gaze from my plate and looked at her. Really looked at her. For 10 years, I had seen her through a filter of wifely duty and forced politeness. I'd seen the critical mother-in-law, the demanding guest, the woman I had to please to keep the peace. But now the filter was gone. I saw a user, a parasite in a cashmere sweater set, who had happily fed on my time, my energy, and my life, and now wanted to make sure I paid for the privilege. Then I looked at Mark. He was frowning slightly, not at his mother's gall, but at my lack of response. He was waiting for me to jump up, smile plastered on my face, and serve the damn crumble. He saw nothing wrong, nothing at all. He had just relegated me to the status of an indentured servant, and he genuinely believed he'd done something noble, something modern. The knot of cold in my stomach began to burn, transforming into a white-hot rage that was terrifyingly calm. My smile, the one I had worn like armor for a decade, finally fell away. "The apple crumble," I repeated, my voice flat and unfamiliar even to my own ears. I placed my fork and knife down, mimicking his earlier gesture. I didn't get up. Instead, I reached for my purse, which was on the sideboard behind me. I pulled out a pen and smoothed out my cloth napkin on the table. "What are you doing?" Mark asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "The bill," I said simply. I started to write on the napkin. Let's see. Organic free-range chicken, that was $22. Russet potatoes, about $4. The apples for the crumble were $1.99 a pound, so let's call it $6. Flour, butter, sugar, spices. Let's round the groceries for tonight's meal to $40, to be conservative. Carol let out a little tittering laugh. "Oh dear. Is this some kind of joke? It's not very funny." I didn't look at her. I kept writing, my pen scratching against the linen. "No joke, Carol. This is our new arrangement, a true 50-50 partnership." I paused, tapping the pen on the napkin. "Now we need to factor in my labor. A personal chef in this area charges, on average, $75 an hour. I spent about 5 hours today on prep and cooking, not including the shopping and planning time, so that's $375. Mark's jaw had dropped. "You cannot be serious. You're trying to charge me for cooking dinner? You said split everything, down the middle," I said, finally meeting his eyes. My gaze was as cold and hard as the diamond on my finger, a diamond I now realized was just the first down payment for a lifetime of service. "Or does my contribution not have any value in this new equal partnership? Is my time worthless?" "This is ridiculous," he sputtered, his face turning red. "You're my wife. And you're my husband. Yet my financial security apparently means nothing to you," I retorted, my voice still unnervingly steady. "So let's see. $40 for ingredients, $375 for labor. That's $415. Split 50-50. Your share for this meal is $207.50. I circled the number on the napkin and pushed it across the table towards him. "You can pay now. Venmo is fine. Carol stared at me, her mouth a perfect O of outrage. Well, I never. Of all the ungrateful. Mark held up a hand, silencing her. He was staring at the napkin as if it were a snake. He looked up at me, his eyes blazing with a fury that was born of pure embarrassment. He had wanted to put me in my place, and I had just shown him precisely what my place was worth. Get the crumble, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Now. I didn't move. I just looked at him, at the man I had loved and supported, the man who had just revealed himself to be a complete stranger. A stranger who thought my work, my care, my entire life was a free service that came with the marriage certificate. He took my silence as defiance. Fine, he snarled, pushing his chair back. If you're going to be a child about this, then forget it. He and Carol sat there, fuming, expecting me to break, to apologize, to go back to being the compliant woman they knew. But that woman was gone. She had evaporated in the heat of my newfound rage. I stood up slowly. I picked up the platter with the remaining half of the roasted chicken. Then I picked up the bowl of crispy potatoes. Then the gravy boat. Mark's eyes widened in disbelief. What are you doing? He stammered, his voice suddenly uncertain. I didn't answer him. I carried the food, the food I had paid for with my time and my life, towards the kitchen. As I pushed open the swinging door, I paused and looked back at him and his mother, sitting at the beautifully set table, their plates half empty, their faces masks of stunned confusion. This is my half, I said, my voice finally clear and strong. You're welcome to go buy your own. I walked into the kitchen and didn't stop. The swinging door flapped shut behind me, cutting off the sight of their dumbfounded faces. For a moment, I just stood there, the heavy platters in my hands grounding me. The smell of rosemary and thyme filled my senses, but it no longer smelled like home. It smelled like unpaid labor. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a wild drumbeat of fear and exhilaration. I had never, not once in our 10 years of marriage, stood up to him like that, especially not in front of Carol. I set the chicken and potatoes down on the counter. My hands were trembling slightly, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I opened the fridge and started methodically taking out containers. I packed away my half of the chicken, my half of the potatoes, my half of the gravy. Every scoop felt like an act of rebellion. This was mine. It had value. I had value. Then my eyes landed on the apple crumble, sitting on its cooling rack. It was perfect. The topping was golden and bubbly, the scent of baked apples and cinnamon a sweet, comforting cloud, Carol's favorite. For a decade, I had made her favorite dessert every Sunday, a peace offering, a gesture of goodwill. But peace had never been a two-way street. It was just my unconditional surrender. I picked up the entire baking dish. I could hear their voices from the dining room now, a low, angry murmur. Mark's tone was rising, laced with disbelief and fury. Carol's was a high, indignant squeal. I ignored them. I opened the back door that led to the patio and the small garden I tended. The cool evening air felt like a balm on my flushed skin. With a deep breath, I walked to the edge of the manicured lawn and tipped the baking dish. The entire perfect apple crumble slid out onto the grass, a messy, steaming heap that the squirrels would feast on in the morning. It was a shocking waste, and it was the most liberating thing I had done in my entire adult life. I went back inside, rinsed the dish, and placed it in the dishwasher. Then I leaned against the counter and waited. It didn't take long. The kitchen door burst open and Mark stormed in, his face purple with rage. Carol hovered behind him, clutching her pearls like a lifeline. "Have you lost your mind?" he bellowed, his voice echoing in the tiled room. "You threw the dessert on the ground? What is wrong with you?" "There was no dessert," I said calmly. "Remember, I forgot to bring it out." I met his furious gaze without flinching. Besides, the ingredients for that were about $15, and my labor was another hour. We hadn't yet negotiated the price. Price? Price? He took a step closer, his hands clenched into fists. For a second, a flicker of real fear went through me, but I held my ground. This is our home. This is our food. You don't get to hold it hostage. You're the one who put a price on it, Mark, I shot back. You and your mother. You just decided my contributions were worth zero. I'm just correcting your math. From now on, if you want my services as a chef, a cleaner, a hostess, an accountant, you will pay the market rate, 50%. Carol gasped from the doorway. The nerve, after everything we've done for you, we gave you this beautiful house, a wonderful life. You gave me nothing, I said, turning my cold gaze on her. Mark bought this house with money he earned while I ran his entire life so he could focus on his career. I managed this home, I decorated it, I cleaned it, I made it a place people wanted to visit. This wonderful life was my full-time unpaid job, and my employment has been terminated. Or rather, my compensation package has been adjusted. Mark just stared at me, his rage momentarily replaced by a stunned confusion. It was like he was seeing a completely different person, and in a way, he was. The woman he thought he'd married, the quiet, accommodating, people-pleasing woman, had died at the dinner table an hour ago. "So, this is it?" he asked, his voice dropping. "You're going to destroy our marriage over a single conversation? Over a budget?" "A budget?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You think this is about money. This is about respect, Mark. Something you and your mother have never shown me. This was just the final invoice. You sat there and told me, to my face, that 10 years of my life had no monetary value. You expect me to live here, to contribute to the bills, with what? Good wishes? The honor of being your wife?" I walked past him and opened a drawer, pulling out a notepad and a pen, the one I used for grocery lists. I clicked it open and went back to the kitchen island, placing it down with a deliberate thud. "So, here's the plan. I'll be drawing up a contract for my domestic services, itemized and costed. It'll include cooking, cleaning, laundry, grocery shopping, and event management for when your mother visits. We can negotiate the terms tomorrow." I looked up at him, my expression unreadable. "In the meantime, the kitchen is closed. You're on your own for breakfast." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, brushing past a speechless Carol. I didn't go to our bedroom. I went to the guest room at the end of the hall, the one that was always immaculately prepared for visitors. I closed the door behind me and locked it. The click of the lock was the loudest, most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I sank onto the bed, my body still thrumming with adrenaline. I had no idea what would happen next. No plan beyond the next 8 hours. I only knew that I was not cooking Mark breakfast. I fell into a restless sleep, half expecting him to bang on the door, to yell, to demand I come back to our bed. But the night was silent. The next morning, I woke to the unfamiliar sounds of Mark clattering around in the kitchen. There were frustrated sighs, the clang of a dropped pan, and the acrid smell of something burning. A small, vicious smile touched my lips. I showered and dressed in a pair of old jeans and a t-shirt, ignoring my usual work-from-home business casual attire. When I finally emerged from the guest room, the house was quiet. Mark's car was gone from the driveway. He'd left for work. I walked into the kitchen and surveyed the scene. A blackened frying pan sat in the sink, a spatula melted to its surface. There were coffee grounds all over the counter and a smear of what looked like ketchup on the cabinet door. On the kitchen island, right next to the notepad I'd left out, was a single piece of toast, burned to a crisp, and on top of it was a $100 bill. I stared at the $100 bill resting on the charred toast. It wasn't an apology. It was a transaction, a contemptuous payment for services he clearly couldn't manage himself, and a message, "You want to play this game? Fine." He thought he could buy my compliance, shut me up with a crisp bill like I was the hired help. In his mind, this settled the matter. He had paid, and now I was expected to clean up his mess and have a hot dinner waiting when he returned. The sheer arrogance of it solidified every ounce of my resolve. I picked up the bill, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my pocket. Then I took the burned toast, the ruined pan, and the sticky spatula, and dropped them all directly into the trash can. I didn't clean the coffee grounds or wipe the ketchup smear. His mess. His problem. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen island with my laptop. For the next hour, I didn't draft a domestic services contract. I drafted my future. I pulled up my old resume, the one I hadn't looked at in a decade. It was pathetic. My last job was as a junior project manager, a lifetime ago. The 10-year gap on my resume looked like a chasm, but I hadn't been idle. For 10 years, I had managed a complex household budget, planned and executed weekly events, handled scheduling, maintenance, and supply chain logistics, all for an ungrateful CEO and his demanding board member. I just needed to learn how to translate that into a language corporate America would understand. I spent the entire day working. I updated my resume, reframing my homemaker skills into household and estate management. I signed up for online courses to refresh my project management certifications. I reached out to old colleagues on LinkedIn, my fingers trembling as I hit send on the first message. A simple, "Hi, it's been a while." By the time the afternoon sun was slanting through the kitchen window, I had a plan. I wasn't fighting for a new contract in my marriage. I was drafting my exit strategy. Around 5:30, I heard Mark's car pull into the garage. I didn't move from my spot at the island. He walked in, briefcase in hand, and stopped dead. His eyes took in the kitchen, still in the same state of disarray he'd left it in. Then his gaze fell on me, sitting calmly with my laptop. His face tightened. "What's this?" he asked, gesturing at the messy counter. "I left you money for breakfast." "You did," I said, not looking up from my screen. "Thank you. I used it to pay for a certification renewal course. It was very helpful." "That's not what it was for. It was for this." He waved his hand around the room, sputtering. "For you to, you know, clean up after you and cook you dinner." I finally closed my laptop and gave him my full attention. "Our new arrangement doesn't cover that. We haven't agreed on the terms. I left the notepad for you, but you didn't leave a counteroffer." He threw his briefcase onto a chair in frustration. "This is insane. I'm your husband. I'm not your client." "Then stop treating me like your employee," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Stop thinking you can throw money at me to make me forget you devalued every single thing I've done for us for the last 10 years. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, a flicker of something other than anger or confusion crossed his face. It looked like uncertainty. He was finally starting to understand that the rules had changed, and he didn't know how to play. "So what now?" he asked, his voice softer. "Are you just never going to cook again? Are we going to live in a filthy house?" "I'm not," I replied. "I know how to cook and clean. The question is, what are you going to do? You have a few options. You could learn to cook and clean for yourself. You could hire a service, or you could make me a serious offer for my labor, one that includes not just payment but respect, a retirement plan, and benefits. But I'll be honest, the third option is looking highly unlikely." The next few weeks were a cold war fought over dirty dishes and takeout menus. Mark tried everything. He tried ignoring the mess, hoping I'd cave. The house quickly descended into a state that horrified him. He tried being charming, bringing me flowers, which I left on the counter to wilt. He tried yelling, which I met with stony silence as I walked away and locked myself in the guest room. Carol called constantly, leaving tearful, then angry voicemails about how I was destroying her son and shaming the family. I blocked her number. Through it all, I worked. I studied, I networked, I applied for jobs. And then I got an interview. It was for a remote position as an operations coordinator, a job that would use all the scheduling and management skills I'd honed running our home. A week later, they offered me the position. It wasn't a huge salary, but it was mine. It was a paycheck with my name on it. It was freedom. That evening, I didn't go to the guest room. I waited for Mark in the living room. I had already packed my bags. I had found a small apartment to rent, closer to the city. When he came home to another dark, silent house, he found me sitting on the sofa, the same spot where he'd announced our split finances what felt like a lifetime ago. "We need to talk," I said. He looked tired, defeated. "Are you going to serve me with an invoice again?" "No," I said. "I'm serving you with these." I slid a folder across the coffee table. It contained a copy of my new employment contract and the contact information for a divorce lawyer. He paled, picking up the papers as if they were toxic. He read my job title, my salary. He looked at the lawyer's name. The reality of it, the finality, finally crashed down on him. "You got a job?" he whispered. "You're leaving?" "You wanted split finances, Mark. You wanted us to be two separate, equal individuals. Well, you got it. I am now a separate individual with my own finances. And I've decided my half of the assets will be better spent on a life where I'm valued as a partner, not an unpaid contractor. But I can change, he stammered, the words sounding hollow. We can fix this. I was wrong. Carol was wrong. I see that now. You see it now because you had to make your own breakfast and your shirts are wrinkled, I said, standing up. You don't miss me, Mark. You miss the services I provided, and my price is no longer negotiable. It's a clean break. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I didn't need his money or his approval. That Sunday dinner, when he and his mother tried to put a price tag on my life, they had inadvertently done me the greatest favor imaginable. They had shown me my own worth. And it turned out I was worth a hell of a lot more than half the grocery bill.